works. Okay, great. Hear me okay? Yeah? All right, great. So how many business people versus technologists? Business people? Technologists? Wow, split. Awesome. Okay, hopefully I have something for both of you today. So a lot of talk about complying with PSD2, PSD2 APIs and all that. I'm going to talk to you about how to compete using APIs based on, now I've been at Apigee for about 9 years, so helping companies for the last 9 years do this. Some stuff that's probably pretty obvious. Basis of competition has changed. All the 1900s were really about supply side competition, right? If you think about manufacturing and optimizing manufacturing in the early 1900s, all the way up to the crescendo in the late 1900s of competing on specific supply chain, right? And you look at all these companies, all supply chain companies that were all founded around the late 60s and early 70s and have grown very large competing on supply chain, right? And enabling companies to compete from a supply chain world. But that pretty much played out. I mean, not that interesting things don't happen in this space, but in the mid to late 90s, the dot-com explosion happened. And really going forward, what we're seeing now is companies competing on the demand chain. You all probably have as many or more good examples that I do, right? But seeing what Apple has done on demand and consumability of mobile compute and phones, seeing how Netflix has changed the consumability of movies really on any device and instantaneously, seeing how Amazon has changed the consumption of storage and compute and network and is really turning the entire IT infrastructure market on its head, right? We could probably spend the rest of the afternoon talking about company after company that's coming from a demand chain perspective and a consumption perspective. There's really three things that I want to talk about when we talk about competing in a demand chain. One, obviously, creating superior digital experiences, most of which means mobile right now. Second is finding new routes to market, getting new distribution, and finding new ways to find customers in niches that you might not necessarily have been able to do. And then the last is the platform model, and everybody loves to talk about platforms and ecosystems, and we'll talk about that for a second. So let's get into demand chain execution. Anybody not take an Uber? Everybody understands this experience and how great this is, right? We got one guy over here, I saw you. Okay, so fantastic digital experience enabled by mobile, not only for the consumer, but also for the driver, right? This whole experience, though, is powered by a set of APIs. What you may not realize or not understand is that Uber has taken those APIs and done partnerships. So you can call an Uber depending on whatever you're doing, right? If you're traveling with United, you can call an Uber. If you're using City Mapper, fantastic app, call an Uber. Your concert tickets that you've bought from Live Nation can call an Uber to take you to your concert. New distribution for how to consume Uber, right? That's great, and that's powered by their APIs, but that's not enough. So Uber itself wants to be the Uber for many things. And this is both an offensive and a defensive strategy, right? So they both want to find new market niches, new uses for their logistics platform through the Uber Instant APIs, right? And this also sucks the oxygen out of the market for any competitor that would try to come in and compete from them from any kind of an angle or flank. You might be sitting there saying, right, yeah, so this is great for digital native, San Francisco startup, whatever. That this isn't me. I'm a 200-year-old bank with huge organization and huge bureaucracy and systems that are 10, 20 years old, written in Egyptian or whatever they're written in, right? which is why I love to tell this story. So Walgreens, 115-year-old regulated pharmacy chain for the United States, which, by the way, has acquired Boots, which is even older than Walgreens. Fantastic digital experience, right? You can refill your prescription using your mobile and get notified on your watch. You can order photos and have them printed at the nearest Walgreens to you. You can schedule a clinic visit, and you can actually be rewarded, not only for your purchases, but you can even be rewarded for your activity. So they have set something up where you can hook up your Fitbit or anything like that, and they will actually pay you real money that you can spend in their stores if you stay active. All this stuff is powered by APIs. So the whole entire digital experience, every button and everything else, it's all APIs, right? So what have they done? Taken those APIs, and they're doing partnerships on them. It's not, fully open necessarily. You hear a lot of talk of open APIs, but they basically are syndicating this functionality out to partners so that you can fulfill prescriptions from many different places and somehow find yourself in a Walgreens store, right? They actually pay their photo printing partners to generate photo traffic for them, right? Because, like photo printing business, come on. It's not that much revenue. But if you walk into a Walgreens store, they know how to sell you something, right? Or you'll also get your prescriptions refilled, right? So they have taken what was a simple project to revitalize a nearly dead business line, which was photo printing. And they've turned it into an API program, and they've looked at everything in their store, everything in their shop, and turned it into an API and created a platform. Now, I think this is a fantastic template for how banks can think about APIs. And the results have been spectacular, right? You guys can read, so I don't need to read this to you. But it's very telling to see how many interactions are coming from apps, and it's not just their apps that drive their traffic. It is also partner apps. The other thing that's interesting about this is, while there are some customers of ours that have direct monetization of their APIs, these APIs aren't necessarily directly monetized. And in fact, in some of them, it's so important that they get adopted, they actually pay the developer. But the results speak for themselves. So how do you get there? I borrowed this from a bank's website. It should look familiar, right? Bank channels, traditional bank channels. I submit to you that banks should be thinking about, and not just banks, financial institutions, but I'll use banks as the proxy, should be thinking about APIs as a channel, just like they're thinking about mobile as a channel. The API is a channel. Now, what does that mean? So that means business people, you can't leave the discussion of APIs to your technologists. It's a business discussion. Huge business ramifications, right? And technologists, if you're in the room and you get this, because a lot of times when we talk to companies, the technologists get it. They're all over it. The business people don't have any idea. You need to figure out how to explain it to them and bring them along, right? Because you're not going to get to an API channel by implementing technology. This may be the most important slide in my talk. If you're going to compete from demand chain competition and in a digital world, you have to understand the digital value chain. The digital value chain starts with a customer. Okay, now, that could be a retail banking consumer, right? that could be, in this particular value chain, the connected experience could be used by a private banking advisor. It could be used by the CFO of one of your largest corporate accounts. It could be a partner. Somebody is using a connected experience that's been built by some developer somewhere, whether it's your developer, interactive agency you're using, one of your partners, right? They're consuming APIs from your company, which is built by an API team. It comes from your back end, from Temenos or wherever. But it goes from left to right is how you need to think about it. And the mistake that often is made, especially by technology teams, is they think from right to left. Because they start with their back end, and they think about, I want to expose these things. How do I expose them? Well, my APIs. You'll never get there, I promise you. After 10 years, almost 10 years of doing this at Apigee, I've never seen anybody get there going from right to left. But it's very natural, right? Because the technology team has spent the last 6, 8, 10 years doing service-oriented architecture and integration and all these other things. They're naturally going to think that way. But you get the business people in the room, you start thinking about it from a channel, you start from left to right. So let me show you what starting from right to left might look like. I purposely, this is a payment gateway SOAP service. I purposely pick SOAP to inflict some pain on the technologists in the room. You almost can't, in fact, you probably can't see it because it's too light. The actual SOAP service starts at the very top of the screen and it goes all the way down to the bottom. This is actually just a 20th of the service, right? The main key performance indicators on this is it there? Does it exist? And can I count on it? But you've got to go beyond this if you want to start thinking about creating a channel. What do I mean by that? If you asked, how long does it take from when somebody says, yes, I want to have access to the service, until they execute a successful transaction? How long would that be? What's the process? Do you have to talk to some lawyers and negotiate an agreement and get 20 approvals? And the network guys have to punch a hole through something or set up some routes, and then something has to get provisioned, right? It's weeks or longer. The standard really should be, TTFHW. What is that? Time to first hello world. From the moment that the developer says, yes, I want access to the service, until they execute a successful first transaction, 5 minutes. 5 minutes or less. Is it totally self-service? Okay. Can they do that in 5 minutes or less? Should be your standard. Do you even measure it? That's a good question. Speed to API. If one of the business people came and said, I have a fintech, I want to do a partnership, I want this specific API, how long does it take? Does it take days or maybe weeks, or is it months? It's an important metric. If you were to actually measure the Net Promoter Score on your APIs, just stop and think about that for a second. What kind of behavior would happen? I'd be surprised if anybody's measuring that right now, but it would change a lot, right, about how things were done if there was an IT executive that was measured on the NPS score of their APIs. So what does this look like, and how does it happen? You can get other examples. This is First Data. The PayEasy site is also being merged with their Clover business. But just to give you an idea, right, how this happens, it's obsessive API design. It's fully self-service through a portal that a developer can go to without talking to anybody. It's a lot of tools wrapped around that API. It's giving them usage analytics, right? It's potentially SDKs. It's all those things. Short commercial break. Tomorrow afternoon, we're actually going to show how to take a core banking service and expose it as an API product. It'd be a great session tomorrow. If you guys are going to stick around for tomorrow, it'd be fantastic. So back to APIs as products. So this is nirvana, right? So if you do this, you're going to be successful. Nobody's buying that, right? Anybody see this? You remember this? What was the message from this? Anybody?
If you build it, they will come.
Yes. Awesome, Helen. If you build it, they will come. This shit only happens in the movies, okay? This is not going to happen in real life. It certainly won't happen for your bank APIs, okay? So what do you need to do? You start thinking about it as a channel, right? Business people should be involved, and they'll have business metrics. I'm not going to stand here as an API expert and tell a bunch of folks in a bank what your metrics should be, okay? You guys can figure that out. But you should have a go-to-market plan, a target market, how are you going to monetize this thing, how it's going to affect your business, right? And you should have some kind of metrics on that, right? And it's not probably, most certainly, not the metrics that you're using today. And some of them will be API specific, right? Because you'll be thinking about, you know, how many active developers do I have? Not just how many are signed up, but how many are actually active, right? What's the traffic growth, those kinds of things. And then there'll be some other ones that affect your business, just like with Walgreens, right? Because they figure these things out. I wanted to spend a minute on kind of the highest level ecosystem, right? Because you hear a lot of ecosystem being thrown around. I want to have an ecosystem. I'm building a platform. I want to have an ecosystem. Platforms are super, super powerful, right? And this is kind of like the nirvana state. And in any particular vertical, people actually build like a real platform. It's very dangerous because they'll tend to own that market. There's usually only one or two, right? What's interesting about this, though, is that you don't actually get there. I haven't seen anybody get there without first going through API products, through building a channel, you know, building those routes to market. My point in here is that there's really no fast way to get to that. Now, what's cool about Nike is the Nike CEO, Mark Parker, I think is his name, was named Fortune Business Person of the Year last year. In the last 4 years, if you've read the Nike annual report, one of the top 3 reasons why he's credited Nike's outperformance was because of their digital program and the Nike platform they've built. So they're not as old as any of the banks in the room here. You know, I think Nike was founded in the 70s. But it goes to show what an old traditional large company can do with technology. But the main point of this is that you've got to go through the work of creating products and thinking about a channel and building the go-to-market to ever be able to think about having a Walgreens or a Nike-type platform and an ecosystem that you've built out. Another mistake that I've seen, you don't learn to swim unless you get wet. You're not going to figure this stuff out. I guarantee it. You will not figure this out all ahead of time, a priori. You'll actually have to get in the pool and try it. In the 10 years that I've been with Apigee, I've never seen a company figure it all out, just jump in and execute flawlessly against plan. They've all jumped in the pool, not seeing all the green lights all the way down the street, right? Not knowing exactly where the road's going to take them, and figured it out as they went. Kind of almost an agile type process. So, hopefully a couple of things that you've gotten out of my very short time with you. Demand chain competition. These 3 things, You have to get the business involved, right, because it's a channel. Absolutely need to start from the left-hand side of the value chain and work your way right. And you should start now, because you won't have all the answers figured out, but you can figure it out as you go along. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Questions?
I confused them all.
Anyone? Anyone? I saw there were a few tweets talking about the API as a channel idea. No one want to follow up a bit more on that? It's something in our report that we've released today that's in your bags as well. We spoke to Martin Spitt. Is Martin here? Oh yeah, hi. We spoke to Martin from ABN AMRO, and they're very much talking about APIs as a digital channel. So we're seeing some of that that sort of growth come along the way.
Awesome.
No one. I think everyone's
Great.
keen for a break for afternoon.
They need their coffee.
Great. Thanks. Cheers.
All right.